Watch right now on the Front News Project. Disposal of North Korean officers. Armed forces of Ukraine destroy the Russian command post at Kursk. Putin's ballistic gamble. Ukraine has an answer. Russian soldiers tremble at the Neptune missiles. Watch the fiery, intense and blazing footage from the front lines right now. The bloody war continues. A war that Vladimir Putin and his cronies have unleashed on Ukrainian soil. The heroic resistance of the Ukrainian armed forces and the entire Ukrainian nation in their fight for freedom continues. Hello, this is Front News. I am Vladimir Timoshenko. The next 30 minutes will be the truth about the war, which our journalists are bringing from the hottest battle zones. Are you ready? Then let's begin. And we start with the most talked about topic of the week. Is that purportedly nuclear device as terrifying as Putin paints it? After the strike on the Ukrainian city of Dnipro, the Kremlin terrorist threatens the whole world, including Germany, ready to strike with nuclear weapons not only in Ukraine, but also in other European capitals. Does Moscow really have such a terrifying weapon in its arsenal? An ultra-modern intercontinental ballistic missile designed for space launch. Weapons of mass destruction. Is Putin really indicating to the world that he could launch a nuclear strike? TSN Week's correspondent Alexander Zahorodny, after analyzing videos and talking to experts, will now explain to you why this demonstration resembles theater, and how this same theatrical display might backfire on Putin himself. Let's watch.
It's 5 in the morning, the city is not sleeping yet, but the Air Defense Command Center is already bustling. 7 Russian cruise missiles are on the radar. They are headed for action. In Dnipro, they aim at the homes of peaceful residents. Another target appears on the screen, significantly faster than all the others, a supersonic dagger. The air defense systems lock onto enemy missiles to destroy them while they're still approaching the city. And suddenly, another appears on the screens. The speed is abnormally high, over 10 Mach, that's 10 times faster than the speed of sound. Most importantly, the object unexpectedly splits into 6 warheads. Impact.
Hello. Yes, I need the briefing.
We do not comment on the ballistic missile strike on
A
Yuzhmash.
cheap performance by Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova. This is how Masha warms up the audience for Putin. He appears on the air without warning. This half-alive corpse. Why half-alive? I'll tell you a
He
bit.
much later spouts another round of nonsense about Russia's military greatness.
With great drama announces, Russia has attacked Ukraine with a new strategic missile. No, tam paraich.
In combat conditions, a test was conducted for one of Russia's newest medium-range missile systems. In this instance, it involved a ballistic missile with non-nuclear hypersonic capability. Our missile operators have named it Oreshnik.
Specialist in armaments, Sergei Zgurovich points out that Putin could have named the missile anything in his address. The missile has been called Rubesh for many years. It's actually a deep modification of an old Soviet missile, the Pioneer.
We believe the Russian Federation used the old Rubesh missile. This missile is not produced in series, and the enemy's stock of these missiles, I think, is minimal and likely only amounts to a few.
$100 million. That's how much Putin's crazy launch of a mock nuclear missile costs, and they have already fired using a nuclear mock-up. Much cheaper Iskanders or Kinjal missiles would suffice for this, costing 10 times less. However, this madness from the Kremlin has immediately brought Ukraine back to the forefront, and gave Kyiv a reason to seek new anti-missile systems. Not just air defense, but missile defense.
За моїм завданням міністр оборони України.
At my direction, the Minister of Defense of Ukraine is already holding meetings with our partners regarding new air defense systems, specifically those capable of protecting lives from new threats.
There are at least 3 specialized
into systems capable of intercepting intercontinental ballistic missiles. Although acquiring them will be difficult, this is the pinnacle of America's anti-nuclear shield. However, if achieved, the interceptors will prove in Ukraine that they can neutralize these threats, Russia could be considered knocked out. In the meantime, our specialists are considering whether there is a chance to intercept these vessels and supplies that fell over the Dnipro with fiery waves. Sergei Zguritsa reassures that the shells, missiles, targets are just metal dummies without charges. Besides, the Russians have very few of such missiles. Overall, it's all a demonstration of Kremlin's desperation, says military expert Ivan Stupak.
This is an act of desperation, an attempt to counter the strikes by Attack MS and Storm Shadows, including against the Northern Army headquarters. And of course, it's a reaction to the Ukrainian missile program. The Russians understand that if Ukraine has its own missile program and it does not depend on the decisions of Washington, London or Berlin, Moscow will definitely face significant consequences.
Perhaps it was with this new missile that Putin tried to destroy the underground storage of Yuzhmash, where most Russian missiles were designed and built. Some symbolism, but they hit the rehabilitation center for people with disabilities, also symbolic.
Це сигнал насамперед Трампу.
This is a signal primarily to Trump. Look, we're launching a nuclear missile denied whether it's intercontinental or medium-range ballistic towards Ukraine, but without a nuclear warhead. The next one could be with a nuclear payload. Therefore, this situation is currently critically important in terms of the West's response.
Officially, the West reacted weakly to this shelling, and statements about the new nuclear doctrine in the United States, discussions about returning the nuclear button to Ukraine, and the urgent convening of the Ukraine NATO Council indicate that this gamble could backfire on Putin. Now, regarding why I called Putin a half-alive corpse at the beginning of the segment, just look at his appearance. His hands are completely lifeless. He did not move a single finger. It doesn't matter whether he was paralyzed by fear or the video was recorded deep in a bunker with the office and the table with already placed hands added during editing. The main point here is that Putin is indeed scared. Any missile can be destroyed, for example, on the launch pad, and Ukraine is already beginning to do this. Our drones reach even Kapustin Yar in the Astrakhan region. For now, they are just drones, but they do reach.
Well, now here's an analysis of the current situation on the much-suffering Pokrovsky front line of the Russian world. And here it keeps destroying, killing and scorching. Since the beginning of the day, on the Pokrovsky front, the occupiers have already made 31 attempts to displace our defenders from their positions in the areas of Mirolyubivka, Lukh, Lesivka, Krutyi Yar, Dachinske, Zhelte, Chumatske, Novi Trud and Pustinia. The defense forces holding back the enemy onslaught have already repelled 21 attacks by the adversary in this direction. And now it's burning on the territory of the Russian Federation itself. Naturally, we're talking about military targets. And after the green light to use Storm Shadow strikes, the situation, let's say, has intensified even more. It landed, for example, on the so-called presidential sanatorium in the village of Marina. This is, as you understand, in the Kursk region. There was a secret center for Russian and, attention, North Korean command. Several North Korean officers were effectively neutralized there. Counted so-called booms that regularly occur on the territory of Putin's Russia, as reported by TSN correspondent Oksana Rodionova.
The rocket seems to have arrived.
On the night of the 19th of November, an artillery depot exploded in the Bryansk region, the 67th Grayu arsenal in Karachev. That is 130 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. The Russians brought North Korean shells, cables, anti-aircraft missiles and ammunition for multiple launch rocket systems there. The General Staff confirms 12 secondary explosions at a detonation near the target area. This arsenal has been attacked by Ukraine for the third time. Previously, our long-range drones reached there and it was burning well.
Whoa.
And this is already the next day, and also in Russia.
Those are explosions, Marina. Our guys are blowing things up.
It's incredible, with 12 strikes simultaneously, considering the number of rockets and the complexity of the attacks. In the video shot by eyewitnesses, publicized by the Russian air defense, you can't hear it. There are two possibilities here. Either we suppressed it earlier, or it wasn't there at all. They attacked the area of the luxurious presidential retreat in the village of Mariino. In the video released by Aerial Systems, it's clear they aimed not at the magnificent palace, but at an inconspicuous building nearby. It is a secret enemy military command center in a deep bunker. The command of the Russian troops group, along with North Korean generals, was concealed there. Among the casualties and injured are Russian and North Korean officials. According to the Wall Street Journal, this is the first time Western officials have confirmed that a North Korean general is among the casualties. The Russian army has been gathering forces for several months to push back into the Soviet Union from Russian territory.
Regarding North Korean military personnel in Russia, there are already 11,000 in the Kursk region.
The number of NDR troops stationed in Russia could increase to 100,000, Bloomberg reported, citing its sources. However, recent events might change these plans. Last night, our defense forces destroyed the radar station of the much-publicized S-400 Triumph anti-air missile system. These were the eyes of the missile regiment of the 6th Russian Army that was shelling Ukrainian border cities. The General Staff does not comment on what was used against the Triumph. Leading Western media, citing their own sources, reported that the armed forces of Ukraine attacked Bryansk for the first time using American ballistic missiles ATACMS. In Kursk, they destroyed a headquarters using Storm Shadow. Information leaked from the White House to the press that the United States gave the green light to use its long-range missiles on Russian territory. It is said that this is a kind of Biden's response to the deployment of North Korean troops by the Kremlin. Officially, the President of the United States has not yet confirmed this information. Kiev has not officially disclosed what Ukraine used for strikes. Ukraine has already employed Western weaponry in occupied territories and has been negotiating lifting the ban on using long-range Western weaponry against military targets in Russia. First of all, it's about the Storm Shadow. This is a modern cruise air-launched missile KTA, capable of covering a distance of no less than 300 kilometers. It first penetrates concrete, then its warhead detonates, which weighs 450 kilograms. The missile is difficult to intercept with a cost of about $2 million and has been officially in service with the armed forces of Ukraine since May 2023.
Так, почалось. Взрывы.
Ukrainian pilots attacked the headquarters of Russia's Black Sea Fleet in annexed Crimea and beyond. American ATACMS are high-precision ballistic missiles. Their range is between 165 and 300 kilometers, depending on the modification. They can be equipped with either an explosive warhead weighing about 250 kilograms or a cluster munition. The HIMARS rocket artillery system and its larger, more powerful tracked sibling, the M270 MLRS, are deployed as well. These systems have been successfully used by the Ukrainian armed forces since the year 2022, and in that October, Ukraine first employed the ATACMS. According to the Institute for the Study of War, Russia has at least 250 military targets within the range of the ATACMS missile provided by the United States. Propagandists demand sterility. Our systematic attacks with long-range drones, both maritime and aerial, have already resulted in destroyed ammunition depots and oil facilities for them. Strategic military productions have been halted and combat ships sunk. And what if missiles are added to Ukrainian drones, beavers, meadows and forests?
And now it is time to analyze the operational situation on the Kharkiv and Kupiansk fronts. The enemy is becoming more aggressive here as well. On the Kharkiv front, the occupiers attacked our unit's positions 8 times in the Volchansk, Tiki and Glubokoye areas. The situation is under control. The enemy attacked our positions 9 times on the Kupiansk front as well. Ukrainian defenders repelled enemy assaults in the areas of Holubivka, Kondrashivka, Zeleny High, Raihorodka, Lozova and Kruklyakivka. Currently, battles are ongoing in 3 locations. The Ukrainian city of Kharkiv has suffered from daily hellish attacks since the first day of the full-scale war. Bombings. Unfortunately, this week was no exception. The Russians deliberately struck the city center in the morning with S-400 missiles. 23 people were injured. One of the strikes hit a courtyard where residential buildings and an administrative service center are located. Details of another war crime committed by the enemy will be reported and shown by our colleagues.
Russians continue their terror on civilians. At 8 in the morning, when people were just heading to work and school, a missile hit the courtyard among residential buildings. The siren sounded only after the explosion, so people had no chance to make it to the shelter in time. So why did
I was asleep and woke up to glass flying
Girl
at
was
me.
more terrified not for herself but for her cat and bird. I wake up, glass is everywhere, doors are broken down. Almost half of hundreds of residential buildings were hit. Facades were damaged. Windows in the apartments were blown out by the shockwave.
Look at the state and state what the state of our windows. Everything was beautiful. As you can see, everything was neat, but now it is what it is. Fortunately, no one was here. My wife works as a doctor, and I work too. Thankfully, no one was hurt. But as you can see, if anyone had been here, they would have likely been seriously injured by the shards.
In total, 23 people were injured, 14 of whom were hospitalized. Most suffered shrapnel injuries, while others were just frightened.
Some experienced only acute stress reactions, while the rest suffered bodily injuries from glass shards, rocket debris, closed head injuries, and acoustic trauma. Mostly the injured were local residents, people living in these apartment buildings, and those who were outside in office spaces or in shops on this street.
Most of the casualties were among those who were in the Public Administrative Service Center building at the time of the strike, which is also located in this block. Both the center's employees and visitors were injured.
This is a brazen act of terrorism. We understand what just happened. Many people come here for services, people came to work. This is a civilian building, a building that provides services to residents.
After the explosion, a fire erupted, which was quickly contained. Rescue workers and utility services continue working at this site, assisting residents of damaged apartments and assessing their losses.
Now back to how things are not going smoothly at the military site within Putin's Russia. Dragon Kapustin Yar is used by the Russians for collecting and testing missiles, and it is exactly from there that the very missile launched which reached the Ukrainian city of Dnipro, the one that Putin for some reason calls Oreshnik. Ukrainian drones visited Kapustin Yar. The aggressors of the Russian Federation were having a very tough time at that moment. Moreover, the Kremlin is very frightened by the Ukrainian Neptunes. What kind of missiles are these? How deadly dangerous are they? Dangerous for the invaders. This is exactly what Oksana Rodionova's next report is about.
Drone operations this week have become even more daring. After attacking Russian assets on our Dnipro in the morning, two unidentified drones attacked the same Kapustin Yar, 600 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, where Putin's new missile was launched from. Russian media are silent about the outcome of our drone's visit. It is known that the Kapustin Yar range is used as a base for missile assembly and testing. And in the Novgorod region, drones attacked the 13th arsenal of the main missile directorate in the village of Kotovo, 260 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. To the direct question of what struck Kursk and Bryansk this week, the president replied,
Sorry, no extra details. Ukraine has long-range capabilities. Ukraine has long-range drones of its own production. We now have the long Neptune INI-1, and now we have the Attack MS, and we will use all of these.
Last month, Volodymyr Zelensky announced that Ukraine is testing 4 types of its own missiles. Ukraine is expected to produce 3,000 cruise missiles and drone missiles by the year 2025. This task was set on Bankova Street. That means 8 missiles daily, indicating that there are funds, production capabilities, and imported components.
Our new ballistic missile has successfully completed flight tests.
They do not disclose what kind of weapon it is. It's likely that what you see in the video is one of them. Its test launch was made public by the National Security and Defense Council last year. It could also be a modification of the Neptune anti-ship missile. The new Neptunes will have a range of more than 300 kilometers and will operate not only from land-based installations. Since 2006, Ukraine has been developing the Sapsan ballistic missile with a range of 500 kilometers. Its export version, Grom 2, has a range of 280 kilometers. Its launch platform was showcased at parades. Before the war, Ukrainians were shown a prototype of the cruise missile Kursun 2. On Independence Day, the president announced the Ukrainian Polyanetsia, or a drone missile designed to strike enemy airfields deep in Russian territory. If Ukraine can produce long-range missiles on an industrial scale, there will be no restrictions on their use, and we won't need to wait months for shipments. We have the potential and the knowledge, as before the war we ranked among the top 10 spacefaring nations in the world. And Elon Musk's favorite rocket after SpaceX is the Zinzete. Zenit mai o zic că este Zenit made in Ukraine.
Now, let's move to the Kursk front direction. Let's be honest, this is yet another sacred goal for Putin and his military commanders, and as such, the situation here is extremely tense. On the Kursk front, the invaders attacked our unit 31 times, trying to advance in the areas of the settlements of Solnsevka, Berestki, Novodmitrovka, Kurakhovka. Remote areas Yelisavetovka, Romanovka, Antonovka, Ignatovka. Currently, 8 skirmishes are ongoing. And now about hell on earth. That is precisely how the situation faced by the residents of the Ukrainian city of Sumy can be described. You know, due to its geographical proximity to the Russian territory, this city is being shelled with particular brutality. 2 people dead and 12 injured in Sumy are the consequences of another enemy strike. The aggressors struck and killed maliciously, deliberately, at 5 in the morning, using Shahed drones on several locations in the city, specifically on residential buildings. Details of this life on the brink of death. Watch right now in the report by TSN correspondent Oksana Solodovnik.
Enemy drones attacked Sumy around 5 in the morning. The Russians sent 5 Shaheds to the city, which exploded in different neighborhoods. 2 drones exploded in the city center, 1 hit the road. The blast damaged the wall of a 2-story house and the owner suffered a fatal injury, dying at the scene. No windows survived in the house opposite and the roof was destroyed. 4 children sleeping in a room miraculously escaped harm.
Everyone is alive. Only the house was damaged, just a bit. I didn't go see a doctor. I feel okay. I've taken the kids for now.
It was loud. We tried to leave the house, all the doors were swollen and blocked. So I went out through the window thinking I could drive my own car and take the girl to a safe place, but you can see what happened to my car.
A second drone hit a power line. Another person died here. The number of injured was rapidly increasing. All the building facades around the explosion site were heavily pitted with small debris. The drones were equipped with shrapnel, metal balls with extremely high destructive power. You can see for yourself. They easily penetrate metals.
From here,
there is gas supply. Even 1 power pole has fallen, so restoration work is underway. Currently, material removal is organized. We are bringing in roofing sheets and plastic sheeting to minimize the damage.
According to preliminary data, explosions damaged 7 apartment buildings and about 30 private homes. Vehicles were damaged at a service station. Relief centers have been set up at the impact sites to assist those affected.
Now we move to the Vremivka direction of the front. The enemy army's bloody frenzy continues here as well. On the Vremivka front, the invaders conducted 14 attacks on Ukrainian positions near Trudov, Vesely High, Razdolny, Sukiyali, and Novodarivka. 7 skirmishes are ongoing. Pre-prepared fortifications are a very important part of this terrible war. During defense, repelling enemy attacks is simply impossible without them. Switching from defense to offense is essentially military art, and young commanders with combat experience often demonstrate this by planning lightning-fast special operations, even in urban environments. Detailed reports by TSN correspondent Vitaly Forosenko.
CV launches a surveillance drone towards the occupier. In a few hours, our soldiers will repel another enemy assault right here. Holding defense on prepared lines will not only allow Ukrainian infantry to stand firm, but also to counterattack. Such a successful counterplay against the enemy is not everywhere, and not just because the Russians are pushing 24/7, mainly relying on numbers. More often, even with a slight retreat, our troops simply lack fortified defensive positions. Clear examples of this were seen in the defense of Avdiivka, that therefore, but first and foremost, the military must rely on pre-prepared fortifications behind them for successful defense.
These lines can be drawn, but as I understand it, around 20 kilometers from the demarcation line with Chishi, Okodishk, Doveshik, Sani, which is outside the range of Russian first-person view drones.
Right now, the situation seems paradoxical. In some rear areas, fortifications are still being completed, while at the same time they are quickly rising right at the front line, where digging has to be done under enemy strike drones. While some are digging, others provide cover and repel assaults.
I think everyone is digging because it's essential. Field fortification, the experience of this war, requires specific solutions that aren't always reflected in our regulations.
Restrain the enemy while not putting the entire unit in danger. On the front lines, even concrete fortifications buried underground aren't always a solution. Sometimes it's better to preserve a soldier's life by retreating to more advantageous positions, say the paratroopers. Today, modern drone warfare demands more mobility and stealth from a soldier.
War has changed. Also, it's impractical to maintain these large Dagat platoon positions because a drone doesn't care. It will fly in, locate and drop, or the same first-person view drone hits.
It's clear to everyone that a strong defense needs enough warriors and weapons. But what isn't clear is why, at fortified positions where these are present, the defense often falls apart. The answer is rather cynical.
Unfortunately, indecisive commanders, before giving an order, say, I'll ask Mikhail Ivanovich, he's busy, maybe in a meeting with Shirsky, until he gets instructions from Mikhail Ivanovich, he won't pass them on to his troops.
Where commanders give orders quickly and thoughtfully on the ground, where there is coordinated work and communication with neighboring brigades, defense is impregnable. But there is another risk here. Constantly staying on the defensive is not an option, the military says, and there is a simple explanation for this.
We need to shift from a defensive concept to an offensive one, so everyone is already defending Marines, airborne troops and special operations forces, but if you remain on the defense constantly, you lose the ability to attack. And by the way, if you look at Western principles of maneuver warfare, one of them is precisely offense, not defense. I would also say it's important and possibly sounds a bit grandiose, but it should be integrated into all these training and application programs.
Switching from defense to offense is a military art, and young commanders with combat experience often demonstrate it by planning swift spatial operations even in urban settings. If all this is supported by coordination between the rear, combat units and engineering troops, such defense is destined to gradually transition into counterattacks.
In one settlement, the enemy took responsibility for each street and attacked with separate battalions. Our forces there were about the size of a company and, relying on the engineered barriers, managed to hold off the enemy for a long time and inflict heavy losses, forcing them to replace entire military units.
And ultimately, the main issue for successful defense and, as a result, preparation for the offensive is the need for weapons. They are necessary. From regular strike drones, which Ukrainians have been tirelessly donating to for years, to Attack-MS and Storm Shadow missiles capable of swiftly destroying even the most fortified air bases, ammunition depots and command centers of the occupiers, both in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine and deep within Moscow's rear.
That's all for today. But very soon on Front News, there will be new, unique reports from our journalists in the hottest war zones brought to you so you know the truth. This was Vladimir Timoshenko. Take care of yourself and your loved ones.